Hopefully everyone can hear me. Hi guys, my name is Vaibhav, or I go commonly as V just because I don't know why I was named that. I apologize again for the color scheme. My roommate actually warned me about this, but I am not the best designer. I'm proud of that. Cool, so I'm very active on LinkedIn. If you guys like Gary Vaynerchuk, I pretty much emulate that guy. So if you ever had a really crappy Monday, follow me. I will throw up a cheesy motivational post. I am that guy. On Twitter and on Medium as well. And I teach at Coder Factory. I work at a software consultancy. And I'm a disciple, and I enjoy programming bootcamps. I think they're bringing a good change to the environment, and they should be encouraged. Awesome. So my talk today is going to be switched into two. How many of you over here are kind of new to React? Let's say, calm down. A month and a bit into React. Okay, a few of us. How many of us call ourselves hashtag medium to senior at React over here? Oh, ballers. Look at you guys. Okay, awesome. So cool, we have a mix of the two, which is what I like. I'm going to cater to both of them. Now, what I'm going to talk about is actually the cool thing that Jess actually mentioned. React has something called state, right? So for those who aren't aware, and I'm sorry if I pick you. I tend to do that when I do talks. It's not because I'm attracted to, maybe I am. I like picking people just to get them involved. Cool. So, SetState, Dan Abramov. He is considered, I guess, the prince of React. He's on the team right now. So he said, declare state changes separate from the component classes. Now this can be gibberish to some people. What do I mean by state, first of all? Can I get anyone in the audience to tell me what they think state means? Anyone? I will pick. Come on, I want to get someone. Anyone? I'll throw chocolate at you. Okay, go for it. Yes, right? It's basically a way of controlling behavior of a component. It's a mindset. That's what state is. You know, similar, we have state of mind, the state of a component. It just keeps track of how that state is at that particular point. So what is he saying over here? Right. A component is any function, like we know, that takes in an argument and returns some HTML, right, to render. Render means load stuff onto the onto our virtual DOM. And state is basically a component state of mind or the present mindset. So we're all okay with that. Cool. So we've seen something like this, right? This is okay. This is acceptable code. I linted it. Now, anyone over here can tell me what super props does? I know most of you guys have used it, and I know you're guilty of it because I would have stalked your code and I've seen you do it. But can you tell me what it does, or are you a guilty Stack Overflow copy paste? Come on, it's okay. I've sinned before. I've done the copy paste. All right, someone. I am going to pick. We had some senior guys over here. I'm going to pick Jess. Let's go with it. Jess, what do you think the super props does?
It sets props on the super.
Hey, well, you are right. So you are right. My mistake. So super props actually, to some extent, is not needed at the current state of React. The concept of super props is to make this.props available in the constructor, which is kind of nullified because we have props available in the constructor argument. So super props is actually a preparation for what I learned in some blog posts is to React Fiber. So this will have a little more functionality over there. For now, it's kind of moot, and we can just work without it. Cool. Now, SetState's main job is to go ahead and re-render data, right? So we know that when we load some data, it goes ahead and sticks to the DOM. How do we reflect changes? We reflect changes using something called SetState. Whoever here was guilty of changing the state by doing this.state.something equals something else and expected it to change magically? I did, right? I honestly thought that was the right way when I started off a few years ago, but turns out not. Anyone know what SetState does? I know I'm asking kind of stupid questions, but some people are new here, some people aren't. Oh, what a lad. Yes, you are right, Sharky. Absolutely. I forgot I put that there. Never mind. I was like, wait, I did not send you my slides. How do you know that? Okay, yeah. Yes, it takes state, it takes in an object and merges into the present state and then causes a re-render to reflect on those changes. Cool? So it's like an update. And we need SetState to basically pull out that particular bit of code and push it back in, the HTML. Okay, the concept of this, the start part is to talk to you guys about SetState. Who over here knew SetState has 3 versions? So who knows that SetState takes in an object? Cool, most of us. Who over here knows that SetState takes in a function? Cool, most of us. Who over here, some of us. Who over here knows that SetState takes in an object as well as a callback? Some of us. Oh, show-offs. Okay, fine. I might have something to show you then. I might not. Cool. So we all know that we have object destructuring with ES6. However, the way it's broken down internally with Babel is we use object as a sign. We create a new object and then pass in the state and something. Can anyone tell me why we actually pass in a new object in object.assign and not actually the state itself? Any guesses? Sorry? And what's wrong in changing the first one? There's no paradigm. We are not Redux. You have a valid point. But what actually React does internally is that it maintains that memory point for that particular object. And by creating a new object, it points to a new memory point, which then indicates to React that, hey, there's something new here, so let's actually go ahead and implement a set state to occur. Essentially why that happens. Cool. Yes, I did that. We basically pass in functions to set state. This was something that was introduced a little while ago, and whoever keeps up with the docs would have seen that as we saw. But some of us didn't, so I'm just going to share the reason why we do that. Cool. Now, I am actually going to go ahead and load this bit of code, and I have it ready to go. Okay. Who over here knows? Just wait. I think I should make that bigger. So ignore the gist of it. Essentially, when I click on the press me button, I go ahead and invoke the get pizza button, which goes ahead and sets the state 5 times. Cool? Everyone okay with that? No? No? Not happy with that?
I don't think about one set history because I don't have a clue what state count would be set state. It may be asynchronous, it may be synchronous.
She is stealing my dog. Wait for the next slide, man. Calm down. Yeah, so spoiler alert what he said, but I'm going to hope that you guys didn't listen to that. Everyone knows everything nowadays, which is cool. I like it. So ignoring what he said, anyone want to guess intuitionally what they think will happen when I click on the button that goes ahead and invokes the set state 5 times? Okay, fine. It's going to go ahead and call set state 5 times, which should technically set our state to the previous state 5 times. So we should see 5 as our output. When I click on it, it only goes to 1, which is weird because I call the for loop 5 times, and the for loop is the first thing we learn in JavaScript, and it runs 5 times. What is happening? My life hurts. No. So set state is an interesting piece over there because, as you mentioned, it's asynchronous. And let's play that again.
Well, right now it depends. In Firebird it will be 100%
Yes, it will be 100% asynchronous, and we'll be able to control it, and we have extra fun stuff in Juice to play around with as well. Cool. So set state is quite tedious. So as you mentioned, it does a few things. It goes ahead and merges the objects passed, invokes a diffing algorithm. It goes ahead and does a reconciliation algorithm check, which is the diffing algorithm, which made React kind of famous, very famous. So it's not quite simple. Facebook made set state async. That's what I heard. You might disagree. I'll give you Dan's number, give him a ring, and tell me any things. Hence, we should not immediately depend upon the previous state's changes. So there's a way we can work around this. Now, one thing I want to ask is, okay, so that's a fair bit of code. Now, this is not exactly what we want to do, but if we had to go ahead and actually depend on the previous state or the new version of state, we can go ahead and create a holder variable and then pass that into our SetState. If we were to depend on it and we didn't know how SetState actually worked. Whoever is like this. When my mom asks me to pick the groceries, I don't care what happens. It's my pride and my human instinct to go ahead and pick up every piece of grocery at one time. Cool? We have to. We can't do that repeat journey. It's just not in me. It hurts my ego. Cool. So SetState's kind of like that. When you give it to do something again and again in a very short time span, it batches things. So who here knows what batch processing is? Anyone? Cool. Let's go with you this time.
So the idea is that talking about SetState, in case you have a lot of state mutations and request animation frame hasn't come, you are able to handle them at once and not try to repaint on every update.
Pretty much. So it pretty much goes ahead and smushes everything together into one massive SetState for us to work with. Cool? So that's exactly what it says. It batches it. So we can think of it as adding it in a list or adding it in an array, essentially for us to work with. And over here, basic for someone getting into React, the way object.assign works is it picks up the last value. So v over here would be oranges. It wouldn't be apples as we would expect it to be because it picks up the last key. And that's how object.assign generally works. Cool? Now the issue is not with passing in objects. The issue is essentially to go ahead and fixing it so that we can asynchronously go ahead and make this work with the previous state that we had access to. So going ahead and looking at my previous, how do I escape? Previous fiddle, I lost it. Oh, there you go. Cool. So the way I would fix it is quite straightforward. I pass in a function to my SetState. Hopefully this has ES6. If it doesn't, I'm just going to write it without a function anyway, so apologies if I hurt anyone writing a function. So function. Okay, I don't know what I did. Oopsie, never mind. And we go to previous state.const. I click on run. And if I click on oops. Case to 5. That's pretty much what we want. Happy days. So by passing in a function, we go ahead and get the result that we actually are after. And the reason we get that happening for us is pretty much because of batching. So what happened when we create a function is we literally created a batch. Think of it as a basic array that goes ahead and saves multiple set states to us, various functions. Now, I'm not too sure this is how they handle the batch, but I thought this was the best implementation, a simple reduce function, which goes ahead and gets access to every single previous state and invokes it with the next. Straightforward. Do I get your approval? Champion, thank you. So that's essentially how SetState works. SetState also takes in a callback, like I mentioned. I stole this from Dan Abramov, his tweets. So what this lets us do is pretty much isolate our components from the changes that our state makes. So it's very declarative right now. We might have had components that are a few hundred lines long because we were handling a lot of state changes, which we don't need to worry about within the component itself. We can modularize that even more. So fewer lines of code, more easier to look at, more easier on the eyes, and that's what you see over here. You can actually import these elements or these particular functions and then run them in the state of that particular component. Testing is easy. We can just test the functions because the functions basically control our state. So it's literally there to be there and make our senior engineers and dev managers happy. Jokes, that's not what we do tests. Cool. So that's the first part, just to introduce that to some people. If you ever face that issue, you know that you can use callbacks to escape that particular problem. Now, okay, I didn't save it. That's dangerous. The next thing that I want to show you guys is, so I built this app in about an hour and a bit. It's basically a very quick, very light, your very own custom Dropbox. I'm just selling that. It's not actually Dropbox. I'm using React, Node, and S3 to go ahead and create this particular product. So I'm just going to go ahead and a very basic demo and hope that it doesn't crash. Drag and drop, picks up the file, uploads it. It's there, it shows up, and that's directly available from S3. So if you look at the little thing over there, it says React Udemy, because this was my Udemy course, and it has that particular file. So how did I essentially structure this app is how I'd like to share with you guys. Anyone over here worked with React and S3 from the front end? Some of us. Cool. And any one of us here worked with React, Node, and S3 from the back end, Node and S3 mainly? Cool. Anyone want to share any particular advantages you saw from the front end versus the back end? Go for it.
Well, more or less for distribution purposes. The issue that I had was we had a huge monolith application. So in the process, we actually split our application up. And now we're using CloudFront S3 for our entire distribution of front end, JWT for managing auth across front end, back end, and it just became super easy to split our front end teams and back end teams and manage everything by API. I guess the biggest scare was in fact just updating and cache busting for your front end, but if you're serving S3, you can actually distribute S3 out for your index and everything else.
Absolutely.
And CloudFront deployment. That's what I use it.
Yep. Perfectly said. It just makes it faster. Let's go with that. Cool. So I want to go ahead, upload file to random computer, make random computer uploader hook to Amazon for emergency upload. I thought of this app was I was at the NSW State office paying a fine because I sped over by 4 kilometers. I had to pay money. Yeah. And they had to make me log in to pass in some information that was saved in my Google Gmail account. Now, being a developer, I went ahead and two-step authenticated my Google account because, hackers everywhere and stuff. And even when I did that and I opened my Gmail on a public account, a public computer, I knew there might be scripts and stuff that go ahead and pick up my password. So it's just not safe. So I thought, why not just make a very basic app, won't take me too long. So in a situation where I want to remotely transfer files that won't have access to my Dropbox, my Google Drive, my Box, my whatever. Just something very quick, drag and drop, make it available. So what I did was went ahead, build the app. It's very simple. We have a computer, very literal drawing. Goes ahead, hits the server, gets a request, a signed URL, which I'll explain very soon, gets that back, and using that piece of information, we go ahead and upload to S3 and get information back. I don't think I explained one thing. Does anyone know what S3 over here is? Yes? Yes? Cool. S3 is something by Amazon, Jeff Bezos, the guys we buy books from, we used to, and then we started buying products from, and now we buy software from. And now he's the second richest man in the world. Cool. That's what you do. Start with books and then go into software. Goals in life. I have a book available. I'm kidding. No. So what happens with Amazon, the way we work with S3 is we pretty much go ahead and get, we need to authenticate, right? We all know what authentication means. We need to authorize our particular request. So how do we do that? We can't exactly expose our keys. Keys are basically a way we go ahead and authenticate or identify ourselves. So we can't expose that to the front end because everything exposed to the front end is exposed to everyone else and everyone else can see it. So the general way, some ways people run it is essentially hit the back end, get a fancy little URL that looks cool and stuff, and then using that URL, make a request to S3. Cool? And that's the general pathway at which we can run. So I have my main app, I have my login, I have my upload component, I have my drag and drop, I had my upload status, and I could show all my files. That's pretty much how I broke up the app. Does this trigger anyone? Are people happy with this? Cool? Will you hire me? No, I'm kidding. Sweet. So like I mentioned, computer, user details go to the server, server then returns a token. General authentication. Who over here uses token-based authentication? Who over here uses session-based authentication? Anyone know why, or anyone prefer token-based to? All right, Jess is keen. Go for it.
I haven't actually answered this stuff. Token-based is preferential because then you can revoke the token at any time, canceling out that session.
Absolutely, perfectly said. And it also helps with cross-domain. So when you have, with a lot of React apps, what we see is we have React run its own server and our backend run its own server. Literally, backend is just a repository. Yes?
By token, you need CSR.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, sorry. So with that, what happens is if our backend crashes, our frontend might be cached, so we can still access our frontend. So users who are cranky and clients who might get cranky still know that the front is ready while you're scrambling with your team at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night fixing the backend. Did not happen with me. I'm just being honest, it didn't. Maybe.
Was it Sunday?
Sorry?
Was it Sunday?
Was it no, it was a Saturday night. What? That's a song. No, it was just Saturday night, and let's just say some people weren't happy. Stupid clients. Cool. So how did I approach this? Quite straightforward. I go ahead and drag stuff. When I drag stuff, yes, a lot of arrows. I'm sorry, but let's just map through it. I drag stuff. And when I drag stuff, I go ahead and ask, go to my backend server, ask it for a specific URL. Say, hey, can you please authenticate this particular file because I want to go ahead and send it, or just create a particular link because I want to send it to S3. And does anyone know whether S3 has folder structures? It actually doesn't, but it emulates it. So when you have like X/Y/Z, it looks like it's a folder structure, but it's not. It's actually flat. S3 has this cool way of doing it internally. Bezos is a cool guy. Ring him up, he'll let you know. He won't. I tried.
They call it objects, I guess.
I'm not too into S3. It's a cool thing to be in though. So yeah, get my URL back. And what I essentially end up doing is receiving all my information, because when I make the request, I make it as an asynchronous request. Stupid question, but it's also a good one when we're working with someone who's getting into code or someone who's self-taught, which is something a lot of people do nowadays. Any explanation as to why we do asynchronous requests? How many of you here came into meetups and didn't know what was happening, and you heard asynchronous a lot when JavaScript was being spoken? Cool. So does anyone know and can explain what asynchronous actually means? You're not allowed. This side's not allowed. Very smart people this side. I mean, everyone's smart, of course. Anyone? Anyone? Come on, come on, come on. Okay, cool, go for it.
I'll do it when I feel like.
Oh, okay, no, you're, yes, yes. Yes, you're right. Essentially, it goes ahead and runs a piece of code when it wants to. Well, not when it wants to. It runs on a separate, dare I say, thread. It's event-based. I'm not triggering you. It's event-based. Node and JavaScript is event-based. It doesn't run on multiple threads. It runs on a single thread. It runs on events. Events are nothing but basic way of listening for something and reacting. Literally, that's actually what happens. We don't worry about what the architecture behind it actually works as. So we're going to go through a bit of this, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the code and have you criticize me. Now, I knew that this was quite small, but I thought might as well go ahead and do this. Cool. So this is essentially what I'm doing. I upload the file by invoking an upload file component. I receive the file in the component mounting. As soon as the file starts to upload, how do I do it? I open a new XML HTTP request. Now, how many of us have actually used HTML HTTP requests as to the multiple different keen person? You can put your hand up in a second. How many of us have used libraries like Axios, Fetch, I don't know, whichever ones, the millions are out there, as to using the traditional XML HTTP request? Anyone familiar with this particular paradigm nowadays? Cool. XML HTTP request was how the OGs ran it. The gangsters, the main ballers, are the guys who made the internet. So that's how we go ahead and load data asynchronously. XML HTTP request means, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically means asynchronous JavaScript and XML hypertext, that's T, which means something, and P and a request. That's essentially what it does. We essentially open up a port. A port is literally like something as you have in your phone or computer. We have thousands of ports available in our computer. Opens up a port and makes a request. We need to pass in the third argument, which lets us know that it's asynchronous, because like I said, OGs, they didn't have asynchronous and cool talk that time. Things ran one by one. We handle the upload, we listen, we register all our listeners and stuff, and then as soon as that, what happens with XML that we don't get? When we enter the cool stuff, we get to work with the actual data. It actually gives us access to how much of the data has been uploaded versus how much hasn't. How many of us have over here built a component or some particular component that has to do with file upload tracking? How did you guys track the amount of information that was uploaded? Go for it. No, you. I'm pointing at you. The meh. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. The event actually gives us access to seeing the progress of how much information was loaded versus how big the file actually is. Also, how am I doing with time? Just good? Cool. I use Redux. It's a small app. I know I could have done it without Redux. I actually did a mix of Redux and React so that I don't want to overuse Redux, and I'll explain why very soon. I did something. I go ahead and have an action that carries the data payload, and then that updates a particular class. For those who don't know Redux, anyone tell me, if I'm a 3-year-old that just ate some sand and came back, what do you think an action is? Could you explain to a 3-year-old what an action is? Let's have someone go for it. Anyone? Come on. How about you go for it? So okay, eating ants. No? You don't want to go for it? Okay, cool. An action is basically an object that carries some information for the reducer to pick up. What is a reducer? It's nothing but a store that contains information for us. Cool? So that's how Redux works. It's quite straightforward. It contains messengers that carry pieces of data, right? Little briefcases. It goes to the main office that has everything over there. And then we have multiple cameras looking at the main office, which then reflect upon people looking inside and saying, oh my God, stock market's crashing, things are happening. And those people who are reflecting and reacting to the stock market crashing, which is our reducer, are classes or components. A weird way of looking into it, but hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Cool, so that's that. And I'll just show you guys a bit of the code so you guys can look at it and tell me what you think. That makes sense. And 1 second. Cool. So if I just run this and Alt play. Cool. Sweet. Need to make that full screen. Oopsie. I'll go ahead and delete everything. Cool. Also, how many of you guys keep doing this in your code? Handful of us? And how many of us know what the actual fix is to go ahead and get the information from the root? It's in Webpack. Webpack does it. Anyone want to give it a guess? I'm using React Create App over here, which is why I didn't want to go ahead and detach myself from the original, or just working off the plain stuff as quick as I can. I could deploy it. Anyone want to give it a guess? Yeah, sure, go for it. Yes, aliases in the new version of Webpack, but before it used to be resolve. You'd have to resolve it to that particular root file. You'd have to resolve it to your app, which is the main root folder, and you'd no longer require that ridiculous ... You would work off straight the root itself, and you can pick anything off anywhere just from the root. Cool? So I go ahead and this is our main app. Request a token for login, which is fine. I go ahead and get stuff from my S3. So what's happening when I drag stuff? When I drop information, I go ahead and invoke an onDrop. When I invoke an onDrop, I make an API request to the backend using api.post, which is just an abstracted file that I've made that contains headers and stuff for my authentication. When I've done that, I go ahead and return it and save it into a new file called new accepted files. Now, any reason why I have to do promise.all? Anyone give me a rough guess at why I do promise.all? No?
It seems like you're trying to upload multiple files, so you want to involve this thing after all of them are uploaded.
Yes, absolutely. I want to go ahead and upload multiple files and only invoke or change my state after all my files are uploaded. That way, if I drag and drop 10 files, after they're uploaded, I can go ahead and, well, actually after they're registered, I can go ahead and send them to their requested URLs on that particular S3 front. So promise.all goes ahead and invokes all of the promises, and once all the promises are resolved, then goes ahead and calls a callback function through promises, which is a then function, and invokes it. Now, this is basically the drop zone. This is what you guys saw over here. This is the code itself. We just have a little drop area. We can go ahead and choose files. We can upload files, and quite straightforward app. Most of the meat of it sits right over here, which is nothing but static HTML and a bit of CSS. I do have a component over here called upload file that goes ahead and does the main upload. And if I go ahead and show you guys the upload file, it's right over here. As soon as the component invokes itself, I go ahead, loads itself, I go ahead and load up my upload file function. Here we go ahead and create a new XML HTTP request. And when I go ahead and do that, what happens is I create that port. As mentioned over here, sometimes I think it's in Safari, if you guys use XML HTTP requests and you don't pass in true, it becomes a synchronous request, which blocks everything else for you. So if you're using Safari just for the edge case, always pass in true in your third request for when you're opening up a port. Otherwise, it would stay synchronous and people will be very angry because everything else will be blocked in your main thread. Anyone over here know what event listeners do? I'm pretty sure most of us do. Mind explaining for those who are new to it? Anyone? Come on. Come on, someone. Just no? Cool. An event listener is basically something that listens for a particular event. In this case, we're listening for the load of our information. The second our data is loaded from our backend, S3 goes ahead and sends back a request saying that we're done. And then that goes ahead and tells our service that, hey, we've loaded our data, and let's go ahead and showcase it in our app itself, which, if I go ahead and click on that, it goes ahead and drops it. What's happening over here is I open a port, I send it to S3, I get back the relevant information from Amazon when it's loaded, and then that goes ahead and showcases it right over here, 1, 2, and 3. And then obviously that's integrated with my backend to go ahead and delete it and stuff, etc. A cool thing I did notice before I end this talk is how many of us update a UI before making a backend request? Anyone? Any particular reason you update your UI without sending the backend request confirmation? Because that might make things, might introduce a few synchronous bugs. Sorry? No, what I mean is, for example, Facebook, when you add a comment, or with LinkedIn, with their new Pemberley front end, when you add a comment or stuff, the comments immediately introduced, but if you look at the network request, it's sent after the comments added in the visual UI. And if it fails, then you have a little toast that says it's failed. So what I came to learn is, after talking to someone from LinkedIn, is that it helps with better UI. They saw that a lot of people prefer it this way, and they actually prefer having a toast that says, hey, I failed, even though they don't actually see that reflection right after adding it. Cool. Yes? Sorry?
It allows you to redo it.
Yes, you can definitely redo it multiple times if necessary, but that's essentially what I came to learn and thought I'll share it with you guys. But yeah, this is the basic app. The chunk of it is over here. I'm going to open source, chuck it over there. So I actually tested it for a bit. So my roommate threw it up on there, offered it for $1, got 1,000 users. S3 was charging $50, so made a bit of cash. It's all out there. You guys just need to make a little cool app and chuck it out there. Fight those green dots, and you're good to go. Sweet, that's my talk. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you.